Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is Monday, March 24th. The first weekend of the NCAA tournament is in the books, and a very chalky first weekend at that. We'll get to that in a minute here. I'm Dan Watkins. Thanks for watching, as always, here as I try to launch my YouTube channel. If you could be so kind, if you like the content, to hit that subscribe button. It would mean a lot. Anyways, a little bit about me. I am a sports anchor and reporter for WBZ News Radio in Boston. I have also hosted many gambling shows, DFS shows, and all that kind of stuff throughout the years. So just trying to also branch out into the YouTube space as well and do some more on-camera, on-screen content here. So as I mentioned, NCAA tournament, first weekend in the books, super chalky at that, as we have our 16 teams set for the Sweet 16. 12 of the original top 16 teams, top 16 seeds from the start of the tournament here have advanced to the second weekend, which is just a wild number. We hardly saw any upsets over the first weekend. I think the biggest one was McNeese beating Clemson, which was like only a 6.5-point line to begin with, and they nearly blew it too. So McNeese advanced to the second round, then promptly got their doors blown off by Purdue. So anyways, as I mentioned, that really chalky start here. Let me just pull up a tweet from Ben Fox of Yahoo Sports. Betting recap here for the first two rounds. Favorites went 36-12 straight up. Hardly any upsets there. A couple of those 12 losses by the favorites were like just 1.5, 2-point lines. Favorites covered the majority of the time, 26 and 22 against the spread, and it looks like the unders did pretty well as well at 27 and 20. So yeah, favorites are cruising so far, which I think is just a byproduct of the NIL era that we're in right now, that these teams are just deeper than you. They're more talented. They have better coaching, more resources. They are better prepared, and we are seeing that here play out in this tournament right now. As we kind of talked about a little bit last week, that this was going to be a chalky start, and that those teams that are at the top here are just, they've clearly separated themselves from the mid-majors and the teams in the power conferences that did not have as good of years here in college basketball. So John Fanta from Fox Sports tweets out that from the Fox Sports research team, in the 64-team format since 1985, there has never been a Sweet 16 to not see at least one non-major conference team. The closest instance was in 2016 and 17 when 15 major conference teams made it, and Gonzaga was the lone exception in both years. The Zags nearly pulled off a big comeback and were the exception to the rule again this year, but Houston hung on and they made some shots for a change down the stretch. LJ Cryer had a fantastic game Saturday night to propel the one-seed Cougars into the Sweet 16. And then to further this, with just this chalkiness and the big boys just eating more and the rich getting richer, Pete Thamel over at ESPN from ESPN Stats and Info, the SEC will have 7 teams in the Sweet 16, the most by a conference since the round was introduced in 1975. The previous mark was 6 teams by the ACC in 2016. A lot of talk heading into the tournament, how the SEC had the best conference possibly ever, and it looks like that's playing out here in this tournament with almost half of the Sweet 16 consisting of teams from the SEC. And once again, as I mentioned before, this is just a byproduct of the NIL era that we are living in right now, the wild, wild west with no regulations right now really on NIL. The rich are going to get richer. These teams that have deeper pockets, these schools that can just afford to throw money at anything that they want, whether it's the players, the coaches, staff, everything, they are going to be better than you. It's just that simple. They are better than you, and they know it as the SEC keeps moving on. So, I mean, hardly any upsets this week. Like I said, McNeese is the 12 seed, being the 5 seed Clemson, which they almost blew, was the biggest upset of the weekend. And that brings me kind of to my next point here. There's been a lot of talk, and that word again is coming up, expansion. People talking about how we need to push this to 78 teams or even 96 teams, like John Skipper, the former head of ESPN, was talking about last week, how he was making parking lot deals to potentially have that happen at like 10 years ago at this point. I am very anti-expansion. I think the NCAA tournament is the best postseason that we have in all of sports. It has the right number of teams right now with 68 and those 4 little play-in games that we have on the Tuesday and Wednesday night is the nice little appetizer to the big dance, and the main course that is the Thursday and Friday 16 games on both days. So like I said, right amount of teams. It is the proper length. 3 weeks. It's a 3-week tournament. All the other major sports or college football now, everything else is just dragged out way too far. I mean, we're talking multiple months now that the postseasons are in the NHL and the NBA. Football expanded to a seventh team. Don't really care for that. I don't think the 2 seeds lost to a 7 seed yet in the NFL playoffs. So it's just you're watering down the product at that point, and you're just delaying the inevitable, which is that these teams that have more talent are still going to win and still going to be there at the end in the Final Four. As we talked about a little bit last week with that Ken Pom stat, that 96% of the teams are national champions since 2001. 96% of the champions since 01 had a top 21 rated offense. 91% of the champions since 01 had a top 31 defense. Ken Pom, then when you look through, there was realistically like 8 or 9 teams that had a legit shot to win the title. And no surprise here, the majority of those teams are still playing in the second weekend, and probably the majority of the Final Four is going to consist of those teams as well. So it's just going to water down the product if we expand. It's going to just drag it out even further. And it's not going to change. Like we see in college football, sure, you get a team that can enter the first round. Maybe you pull off an upset in the first round, but then you're going to get beaten. Because these, by the way, if you think expanding this thing to 76 or 96 or 80 or whatever the number is going to get the potential of more Cinderellas, no, it's not. Okay, you're just going to get more teams from the major conferences, from the power conferences. They're going to get more seats at the table. We might see, guaranteed seats at the table here for teams in the SEC in this year's tournament, and it's just going to be more of the same there. And more like that, where it's just going to be a major conference team and they advance a couple of rounds. They're going to be your Cinderellas from now on. The St. Peter's Peacocks, those days, they're long gone. They're not coming back as long as we don't have any regulations on NIL and all that kind of stuff. So I'm anti-expansion. I don't want anything to do with it. I think the NCAA tournament is set up just about as perfect as it can be, with the 4 days to start here, the 68 teams, 3-week tournament, all that kind of stuff. That being said, though, there is one gripe I have with this tournament, and that is the Sunday schedule. Why do we have to wait till 7 o'clock at night on Sunday to have the majority of these games? We get standalone island games at noon and 2 o'clock, and then we have all these games log jammed in like the 8 o'clock hour. No. Okay, and don't tell me that the ratings are better at that time of night and all that kind of stuff, because look at football Sundays. 4:25 is the best window, and that's how this should be set up. You should have an island game at 12 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, and then we get the majority of these things tipping off in that 3:30 to 6 o'clock window, and then you can have one late game as well that tips off by 9 o'clock, the latest on the Eastern time. You've just shoved basketball down my throat for 96 hours, 4 days. Okay, stop. All right, let's have this thing all wrapped up, buttoned up, have the Sweet 16 finalized by like 10 o'clock on Sunday night at the latest. I don't need to be staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning watching Oregon and Arkansas play the foul game all night long, as that game, the last 5 seconds of that game, felt like it took like a half hour. So that is my only gripe with the tournament. Make the Sunday schedule start earlier, and then other than that, we're good to go. So with that being said, let's head to some of the reaction and just to kind of look at what happened here in this tournament, in the second round. I want to start off with that Florida and UConn game, which was one of the best games of the tournament so far. Florida survives. They come from behind to beat UConn, knock off the 2-time defending national champions. And like they say, right, if you want to be the champs, you got to beat the champs. And that's what Florida did yesterday. Their offense woke up in the second half. You can only hold the Gators offense down for so long. They survived shooting just 64% from the foul line. That's going to have to change for the Gators if they do want to cut the nets down in San Antonio, because other teams are going to be deeper than this UConn squad. This UConn team, as we talked about a little bit last week, very flawed this year. They turn the ball over a lot. But Dan Hurley, hat tip to him. Just one of the best tournament coaches we've ever seen. I mean, an incredible run, 13 straight wins, 13 straight covers for Danny Hurley and the UConn Huskies before that streak was finally snapped yesterday. And actually, it's 14 straight covers now because they did cover. That was a 9.5-point game. when it tipped off between UConn and Florida, and the Huskies only lost by 2 points there. And how's this for a narrative, by the way? Todd Golden, the head coach at Florida, taking his Gator team to the the regional semifinals out west in San Francisco, where he was the head coach of the Dons. It's where he started his head coaching career. Now he has a chance to punch his ticket to his first Final Four in his coaching career if he can just win 2 games in San Francisco next weekend. So really cool stuff there for Todd Golden and the Gators. Moving on, and we're talking about great coaching jobs here. We got to talk about John Calipari in Arkansas as they knock off St. John's. I mean, how about Coach Cal and the Razorbacks, right? They got this team to just completely outplay the Johnnies in Providence, which was basically like a home crowd for St. John's on Saturday afternoon. The Razorbacks have gotten Boogie Flan back for this tournament. Okay, he hasn't really stuffed the stat sheet yet, but just his presence on the court has been huge for Arkansas. And now they get that shot in the arm, and now as they head to the Sweet 16, they could be getting their leading scorer back, Adu Thero, who's been out for the last month. So Arkansas is getting healthy here, and as they look to take on a Texas Tech team, they're going to have some more firepower to work with, and what's going to be a really gritty, grinded-out game coming up in the Sweet 16. Just a tremendous job by Coach Cal in Providence, knocking off both St. John's and Kansas. Great stuff from Arkansas there, as they are the Cinderella this year, whether you like it or not. John Calipari has some Cinderella magic working with his Arkansas Razorback team. As for St. John's, personally, as a Boston guy, I'm very happy that this New York St. John stuff is over with. I'm very happy that Rick Pitino and the Johnnies have been eliminated. That being said, I mean, the offensive struggles with St. John's finally caught up with them. They were ranked 64th pre-tournament in KenPom when it comes to offensive efficiency, and then they just had a terrible shooting day on Saturday against Coach Cal and the Razorbacks. R.J. Lewis was their leading scorer this season. He had his butt on the bench in crunch time because he had an atrocious day from the field. 3 of 17 shooting for him, and it was just something. It was a wild sight to see in 2025, having your top scorer benched in crunch time of a tournament game with your season slipping away. That kid will probably transfer out. Would not surprise me whatsoever after what just happened there in Providence over the weekend. But great job by Rick Pitino getting St. John's back to being relevant. It was a cool story at the time being. I'm glad it's over. And no one, I think, has rehabbed their image better than Rick Pitino over the last 5 to 10 years. From everything that happened at Louisville to then having to go to Greece and Iona and back to St. John's. Just an incredible story there for Rick Pitino and St. John's. Michigan, we got to talk about the Wolverines because I stupidly bet against them in both games to start this tournament. They outlast UC San Diego, who tried to make it close at the end there in the first round, and then they come storming back to take down Texas A&M. I mean, this Michigan team, their composure and mental toughness, guys, it's fantastic. It is off the charts. Dusty May is just pushing all the right buttons with this team right now. Eventually, it's going to catch up to them, though, right? You can't play this many close games in a row and just expect to keep on winning. But let's just take a look at Michigan's schedule and what they've done this season and how many close games they've played. Yeah, the A&M game got a little out of hand there at the end, so it was a 12-point win. But a 3-point win against UC San Diego. You head back to the Big Ten tournament. They beat Wisconsin by 6, Maryland by 1. Purdue, they did kind of blow their doors off a little bit there towards the end with an 18-point win. Back in the regular season, 2-point win, 3-point win, 3-point win, 2-point win, 3-point win, 4-point win, 3-point win, 4-point win, 4-point win. Eventually, it's going to catch up to them, right? Right? I mean, it should, but you never know. They might just have the horseshoe shoved so far up their behinds that it's just not going to matter, and they're going to keep on dancing there. They never panic. They never quit. They are so composed. Dusty May's an awesome head coach. He has this team playing so well. They got the Twin Towers there in Golden and Wolf. They're both having very strong tournaments so far. It's going to be fascinating to watch that matchup between those two and Janai Broome in the Sweet 16 with Auburn coming up. Speaking of Auburn, the Tigers, the number 1 overall seed, they just keep winning. It doesn't matter how pretty it looks. It hasn't really looked pretty at times for Auburn. They have yet to play their A game in this tournament. There's been times where something just feels off with them, right? They struggled with Alabama State for a little bit in the first round before they pulled away and got the 20-point win. They were trailing Creighton at halftime before they come back. They end up winning that game by double digits. Chad Baker-Mazar is a little banged up for them heading into this Sweet 16 matchup. We saw him miss a big chunk of time against Creighton on Saturday. and he never really looked 100% when he came back. The Tigers have 4 days to figure things out here, right, before they take on Michigan on the 28th. But like I said, they're going to have to play their A game at some point here. And if they don't have it against Michigan, like from what we've seen with the Wolverines so far, Michigan's going to figure out how to win a close game. So Auburn's got to figure some things out here as we head into the next round. Houston, that got sweaty, didn't it? The Cougars were up big for most of this game against Gonzaga as I try to find it here. There we go. The Zags come back and backdoor cover this one, by the way. At 5.5 was the line. It was a 5-point win. The Cougars were in control for 35 minutes in this one. And then all of a sudden, Gonzaga makes their run, makes things makes this somewhat interesting. Hat tip to Houston. They made shots for a change. They made big shots for a change. And LJ Cryer specifically with 30 points and 6 3-pointers made just silenced the doubters and silenced the crowd and silenced that Gonzaga comeback, which was just too little too late. I mean, they really started off sluggish in this one and they could never quite catch back up. You can't play the way that Gonzaga played in the first half and expect to take down a number 1 seed. And they also had no answers for John Cryer, which sometimes that just happens in this tournament. I mean, guards can take over games like this, and especially in the first weekend. And LJ Cryer did that with that 30-point game there. All right, before we move on, I just want to make sure that we are still live here because it looks like we might have had some trouble. Let me just check. Where is my YouTube live stream? Okay, I think we're still live. Anyway, all right, heading back here. Let's reset. We're going to talk about this BYU and Wisconsin game. Let me find that there as we scroll up. There it is. This one was a lot of fun. Just back and forth, high scoring. Wisconsin, too little too late at the end there again. But BYU, this offense just looks incredible so far. They put up an 80 spot on VCU, something that nobody has done at all ever this season. I don't want to say ever, but nobody's done this season. BYU put up 80 on VCU, and then they topped that by putting up 91 on Wisconsin. They just kept making shots down the stretch, and sometimes that's really, like, when you lose a game, the other team just made their shots. It's as simple as that. And with Jimmer in the stands, of course they make their shots. I mean, come on, Jimmer's there. Like, why wouldn't they make their shots with Jimmer in attendance? I will say this though, with BYU, you don't want to get in this back and forth, tit for tat, shot for shot game with Alabama coming up in the Sweet 16 because that tends to not go well. In that game, by the way, as I was looking here, as we start kind of taking in and trying to figure out which plays I want for the Sweet 16 matchup, 174.5 is the total in this BYU and Alabama game. This game might push 200, like with all things considered. These two offenses want to get up and down. They want to take a bunch of threes. They hit a lot of their threes as well. This is going to be wild, I think, Thursday night. And what a way to start the Sweet 16 too, by the way, with Bama and BYU, and what's just going to be points galore in that matchup there between those two teams. A really impressive win for Kentucky on Sunday night, guys. Like, it felt like everybody was on Illinois going into this one. Wire-to-wire win, never really in doubt for the Wildcats. Mark Pope has his alma mater back in the Sweet 16 here. They're playing solid defense right now as well, on top of hitting their shots as they normally do. Kentucky's forced 25 turnovers through 2 tournament games compared to committing just 15. That's definitely a good sign there for Kentucky. And now they go and take on a Tennessee team that they've already beaten twice this year. So they have the formula to advance to the Elite Eight. Let's see, though, because as they say, it's really tough to beat a good team 3 times in one season. Maryland, Colorado State, game of the tournament so far. This was just absolutely incredible. Derek Queen with the buzzer beater off the glass to send Maryland and the Terps to the Sweet 16. They come roaring back in the second half, and then Colorado State retakes the lead with like 6 seconds left on a wide open 3-pointer. I mean, you're up 2 or whatever it was. Maryland just leaves that guy wide open, and he drills it. Credit to him. But then Maryland never panicked, stayed composed, and they end up going down and hitting a buzzer beater. Some people thought he traveled, but I don't care. Reward the exciting play. Derek Queen hitting the buzzer beater. And I don't really know how else to describe what happened there in that Maryland game between the comeback letting it slip away with 6 seconds left, and then a buzzer beater. Other than the Big Ten has some weird voodoo magic going on in this tournament right now. They are 12-4 straight up as they advance here. They have, I think, 5 or 6 teams in this next round. So really just impressive stuff by the Big Ten here in this tournament. Colorado State should have won that game. They shot better. They crushed Maryland on rebounds and also on the offensive glass, and just a crushing loss in a game that they led by 12 points at one point. So like I said, Big Ten voodoo going on in that matchup. Maryland moves on to play Florida, where they're going to have to play a lot better than they did against Colorado State if they want to advance to the Elite Eight. Ole Miss, a really impressive win for the Rebels. In this one, I got to find this game. Where is it? I think we're going up. Let's go up. There we go. Ole Miss, really impressive. Never in doubt against Iowa State. They were the dog of the day on FanDuel, by the way. If you played Ole Miss on the money line and use your token on that, you got a nice $55 bonus bet to use. That's sitting in your account this morning if you played that. I know Iowa State was missing one of their best players, but I mean, the Rebs pretty much shot the lights out in this one. Just one of their best shooting days of the season. 58% from three-point range. Chris Beard's taking Ole Miss to the Sweet 16 for the first time in 24. Doing that kind of stuff, you're not beating them. They are too good. They're too deep. They are so solid all the way around. Nobody's taking them down if they're going to play like that. So pray for Arizona next week. Purdue, good for Matt Painter. People, including me, doubting the Boilermakers heading into this tournament. I thought they were going to get knocked off by High Point on Thursday, take care of business in that one, and then they kind of blew the doors off of McNeese on Saturday. So now all he has to do is get 2 wins in Indianapolis. 7 typically do. But the problem always with Tennessee is, are they going to hit their shots? And they've lost to Kentucky twice this year. So can they finally figure this thing out as we head into this Sweet 16 game? Going to be something really interesting to watch. They're going to need that defense with the way that Kentucky's playing right now. That's all I can say about that. Sparty, Michigan State, Tom Izzo, 16th career Sweet 16. How about that? They're horrible from beyond the arc. I do think that's going to catch up to them. I did pick them to make the national championship game. I have them losing to Duke in my bracket. Not that any of you care what my bracket looks like, but I do have them going that far, and I'm not feeling great about it right now. Although they do just have this never quit attitude about them, and they're going to be able to grind some games out. I don't know if they're going to be able to get to the national championship game, though. That three-point flaw it's pretty staggering there, as I think they shot like 20% last night or something like that in that game against New Mexico. But like I said, they're gritty, and that can take you pretty far in this tournament. Texas Tech, I like how they're handling their business right now. They take care of business against Drake. They did it wire to wire without their three-point shot falling. The depth with Texas Tech is concerning, and it's the 3rd straight game also for them against a double-digit seed, right? They take care of UNC Wilmington in the first round, who was the 14. They beat Drake, who's the 11. Now they play Coach Cal, who's a 10 seed, not your average, not your typical 10 seed there. Going to be really interesting to watch in this matchup here between Texas Tech and Arkansas. And then finally, Arizona and Oregon, great game. The Cats got down big early. They come storming back. They were actually winning at halftime, and they end up holding on there at the end to beat Oregon, their former Pac-12 rival, which was fun to see in that matchup there. Tommy Lloyd and this team, they're just not consistent. And they're going to have to play a consistent 40 minutes if they want to beat Duke in the Sweet 16. Because if they don't, if they slip and fall behind like they did against Oregon last night, and they do that against Duke, they're not going to come back. Duke's too good. They're too good. They're too talented. They're too composed. They're just all around a better team there. And I was actually a little surprised. I actually thought I thought this line would be closer to like 6.5. It's like an 8.5 or 9.5 line right now as we look at this matchup. So when we look to the Sweet 16, right, which games intrigue me the most? I mean, that first one that we talked about there between BYU and Bama, 174.5 is the total. Would not surprise me if they blow through this and get close to 200 points. We might have like a 95-92 game between these two teams on Thursday. Maryland and Florida should be interesting. Maryland's going to have to play much better than they did against Colorado State if they want to beat Florida. Arizona and Duke could be interesting, but like I said, what Wildcats team's going to show up? If they start off slow like they did against Oregon, they're not going to have a chance against Duke. Would not surprise me one bit if Arkansas pulls off the upset here and takes down Texas Tech. Ole Miss, Michigan State, Kentucky, Tennessee, Michigan, Auburn, another one that's interesting. I actually think Michigan might be my favorite bet right now. But then again, I can't get this team right ever this season, it feels like. But 7.5 just feels like way too much against an Auburn team that just is not playing their best basketball right now. And Michigan just has a knack to keep these things really close. And then finally, Purdue and Houston. Purdue getting 8.5 in what's basically a home game. I think I like that as well. All right, let me just pause here, take a sip of water. So once again, if you could, if you like what you see and you like the content, if you could just hit that subscribe button, it means so much as I try to build this YouTube station. So thank you very much for watching. Let's see what the model has as far as best bets for the Sweet 16. Let me just pull up my rhythm model. Best bets, by the way, we went 7-9 in the first round, lost like 2 units there. Unfortunately, neither of those money line dogs that we gave out last week, UC San Diego or VCU, came through. The Tritons almost did, but unfortunately they did not. So as we look to the Sweet 16 here, I'm just looking on my phone when it comes to some best bets. The model likes Duke to cover, not a surprise. It's got Duke winning this game by 10 points. 8.5 is the line right now. Maybe this comes down a little bit. Yeah, we're at 9.5, so it might actually be moving towards 10. If you can still find that 8.5 out there, the model likes that play as a best bet. It likes Michigan State to take care of business at 2.5, so a possession game there. As well, it likes Tennessee to snap their losing streak to Kentucky and get their first win. It says Tennessee should be favored by close to 6 points in this one, so a little bit of value when it comes to the Vols. And then what else we got? Any totals here? Likes the under in the Michigan and Auburn game ever so slightly. And also the under in the Texas Tech-Arkansas game at 147.5. There's a 146 now. So shop around. Always important to shop around there and find the best line. But those are just some of the early looks when it comes to this Sweet 16 round later on this week. Speaking of later on this week, I'll be back, I think, on Wednesday to do a preview of the Thursday games, and then we'll do a Thursday show for a preview of the Friday games. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me at Dan Watkins Radio, as you see there on your screen, on both TikTok, Twitter, as well, or X, whatever you want to call it, as I'll be posting more stuff on those channels. So thank you very much, guys, for watching. If you could hit the subscribe button, it would mean so much to me. So thank you very much, and enjoy the start of your week.